Hola, angels. Um, I know I promised the last recording we were going to talk about this shootout at the Laughing Palomino. That'll be the next recording, but for right now, I need to give a little backstory to allow it to be clear. Um, I want to this is from chapter 24, and I want this tattooed on the inside of my eyelids as well. There's a lot of information in there. Forget not that the healing of God's Son is all the world is for. Forget not that the healing of God's Son is all the world is for. That is the only purpose the Holy Spirit sees in it, and thus the only one it has. You know, powerful, powerful quote from Jesus. I did not see this most of my life. I saw it as I need this, I need this, I need to get this, I need to be living like this. It was all based upon desires that were not just for the peace of God. So, oh God, I turned 50, and as a child, my grandmother, my Irish grandmother, lived with us for a while, and oh, she was a magical woman on so many different levels. And she used to tell me stories about how the Irish would build their house above their animals, like a barn. And that stuck with me my whole life. And it was one of those desires that I hung on to. I loved my horses. I always wanted to live closer to them. And it seemed like a great idea to live above them. So when I turned 50, my parents had left me some money when they passed, and I purchased land. And I had enough money left to build a barn so that I could live without a mortgage, because my whole game plan in, again, another great idea by me, but it wasn't necessarily in the script for me, of how to retire without a mortgage, with a place to stay. It was kind of creating the perfect scenario in my mind of how it would be for me. So when I turned 50, I embarked on this whole process, bought the land, beautiful property, close to Pecos, New Mexico, outside of Santa Fe, and started to build my barn. Now, I didn't feel like I had the skills to do it. So unfortunately, I sought the help of a contractor who I thought did not have my best interests at heart. And the truth is, I saw him as a sinner pretty much the whole time that he was working for me. But I never fired him, so he continued working for me, and I continued to see him as a sinner. Now, grievances hide the truth of who we are and will always lead to chaos. I had a huge grievance against him, and a lot of grievances. And so that was leading to chaos. And I had no idea how big and dramatic it would become. So in the story, the parable of Calico, there's always been grievances against banks, governments, politicians, and there was a lot of forgiving myself for judging them, see them differently, as access to seeing myself differently. And some of these lessons were big and dramatic, and this property ended up being one of those big dramatic lessons. Another thought that I had during the 60s, I did a lot of Werner Erhard had trainings, S trainings. I did a lot of them. And during one, the leader said that some of the hardest stuff to deal with are those that see themselves as victims of something. And I remember the thought that I had when he said that was, thank God I don't see myself as a victim. And that came back to slap me in the butt, so to speak, many times. But this was one of the biggest times, because I felt a victim to the world. And it started with the contractor, and I had to eventually get a mortgage. because there were cost overages, and I saw him as a sinner, which was just setting up chaotic life. And I got this mortgage. It was a perfect mortgage, 30-year mortgage, fixed rate. I mean, you couldn't get a better mortgage. And it was for 200,000, and which is not a lot, but it was doable. And so life continued until 2007 when all the mortgages fell apart, and mine included, even though it felt like a perfect mortgage. And this started almost a 7 or 8 year cycle of making a bank wrong. And it definitely was building a chaos in my life that I could have stopped if I had just thought, let it go, but I couldn't. So one day I get a letter from Chase Manhattan, and I had a fixed rate. They couldn't change the payment on it, but they had. In that one letter, it said, I can't remember what it was, but your mortgage payment's going to go up $400 a month or whatever. And that was a lot of money. And so I called them, but it was 2007. You couldn't talk to anyone at the bank. There was no one there. And they had, I'm sure there were minimum wage people staffing the phones. And if any of you've been through this, it's like I would call them, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. And then they'd ask for the same things. They'd say, well, fax us this and fax us that and fax us this. And I used to joke, I see the fax as just opening up to a giant trash can, because I'm sending all this information repeatedly, but they weren't seeing it. And all I wanted to do was fix my monthly payment. Well, I hired a forensic accountant and, basically had him do about a year's worth of investigation on it. And it came to find out that my mortgage was originally with a small mortgage company, and they sold my mortgage to Chase Manhattan. And then that process, Chase did a clerical error that actually resulted in me seemingly owing more money. So it was a simple thing, but it turned into a very big thing because I wouldn't let it go. I couldn't forgive it. So again, this was like a 7 or 8 year process. At some point, I went through several attorneys, but most of the attorneys in New Mexico couldn't handle it. Taking on a big bank is kind of a big deal. That's what I found. And there was actually a firm out of Connecticut that called me. They heard about me and they wanted to take me on, not as a class action, as an individual. So I started this relationship with them, and a dear man. He would call me, the guy that was taking on my case. I really loved him a lot. And, the problem was everyone said, you're right, you're right, you're right. And every time someone said, you're right, it built in my mind, I'm not going to let them get away with this, because I already had grievances against banks, governments, politicians, angry men, men in power. And so it was like, I was flying the right flag of I'm right, and you just need to see that I'm right. And the problem was I was making them more and more wrong by claiming more and more I'm right. And that was leading to a huge, atomic explosion, is all I can say. Because again, the world is only for us to get the lessons we would learn. That's it. It's not about owning property. It's not having a perfect place. It's not having horses. It's none of that. But I was still into creating the perfect life for myself. And so this was seriously dismantling that. And I will share about the shootout next week, because that was kind of the turning point. But the reality was, this attorney, after the shootout happened, there were politicians from New Mexico calling him in Connecticut saying, drop Calico, or we will make sure that you never practice law again. I mean, it got crazy. And he called me and we talked about it. I said, look, if you can help someone, great, but you're not going to be able to help me because they obviously, again, I was obviously seeing myself as hugely being victimized by a system. And I wasn't willing to let it go. And the reality was, I was not needing to be out in the country by myself. It was, I mean, one of the, the big points about this property was I had no cell phone connection and I could see no one from my location. I was surrounded by on three sides with national forest. It was exactly, I wanted to isolate. I had gone to Africa. I've been so disillusioned by the world. The only thing I knew was to remove myself from it. And little did I know that's what was being given to me. They were removing me from the perfect house. Then cancer came sort of after that. And it was like I couldn't see that because I was still so committed to my comfort, not the lessons I would learn. And the biggie was just go for the peace of God. Everything else will come under that. And it's like, you'll be happy no matter where you are. But I couldn't see it at the time. So I was still fighting for it. And the foreclosure was a piece of it. The contractor, seeing them all as very wrong. And I was very right. And all I can say is if you're in a situation like this, and especially if you're going through the legal system is all about right and wrong. There's nothing in that world that'll come out healthy, like a healed mind. All that will come out of that is chaos. Like um, let's see, there was another quote. Oh, okay, this is from the text, chapter 6. You have probably reacted for years if you were being crucified. This is a marked tendency of the separated who always refuse to consider what they have done to themselves. Projection means anger. Anger fosters assault, and assault promotes fear. Okay, all of those were coming in place with me making the banks and this contractor wrong. And the reality was I was terrified. My house is going to be taken. I had no money left, on and on and on. The real meaning of the crucifixion lies in the apparent intensity of the assault of some of the sons of God upon another. The bank was wrong. The contractor was wrong. I mean, that was my crucifixion. That was my crucifixion while making them wrong. This, of course, this assault, this crucifixion, of course, is impossible and must be fully understood as impossible. Otherwise, I cannot serve as a model for learning. And that really is the crux of my mind training, really started with the Laughing Palomino, which was a beautiful heaven for me. I felt very happy there. But I even noticed, as happy as I was there, I remember one day, I don't know, I had dogs and I loved my dogs. I never raised my voice to them. And one of my dogs did something and I yelled at them. And I remember thinking, wow, what's that all about? I never yell at my dogs. And so it was like these things were peeking through in my mind, but I wasn't catching them as real problematic. And I needed to pay more attention to them to get back into a healed mind. And so I continued, I built the house, left me with the contractor, and he was a sinner. And this is from text 26, chapter 26. Sin is not error. for it goes beyond correction to impossibility. Yet the belief that it is real has made some errors seem forever past the hope of healing and the lasting grounds for hell. And this was the perfect house for me, was the lasting grounds for hell, because it was built on the idea that sin and my persecution was happening. And that is always going to be a lasting hell. So all I can say is if you are seeing yourself persecuted, really start the mind training. And it may come up, that again, like I was right, it was a clerical error. It was a clerical error. And so I was so right. And everybody I talked to, including those in my book study group for ACIM, I said, you're right, you need to file a lawsuit. And it was just getting bogged down everywhere. And I'll just say this as the last piece before we move into the shootout. Or maybe I don't. Yeah, no, I won't even go into it. Just know I felt completely victimized, totally persecuted, and completely right. And if you find yourself in a state, no matter what your parable is showing, no matter what your script is showing you, all I can say is ask for assistance from Holy Spirit to see it differently, because you want to get back to heaven as soon as possible. Because really, seeing error on a grand scale like this it's only you continuing to dig your grave deeper, and it just takes that more to get out of it. So I think that's enough for this. I want to end with this quote from chapter 6. If you react as if you are persecuted, you are teaching persecution. This is not a lesson a son of God should want to teach if he is to realize his own salvation. Rather, teach your own perfect immunity, which is the truth in you, and realize it cannot be assailed. Do not try to protect it yourself, or you are believing that it is assailable. Remember always that what you believe, you will teach. Believe with me, and we will become equal as teachers. So I just say a happy ending is always assured if we're willing to give up being right. That's the big one. Okay. So next recording will be the shootout at the Laughing Palomino. Okay. Bye, everybody.